Different climatic conditions can have a big impact on how the trees manage cocoa production, at timescales of a few months to over a year. In the following, we will be mainly focusing on the different climate impacts on trees in the world's main production region, in West Africa, but most of these effects apply to cocoa trees no matter where they grow. So let's start with the most obvious. Let's start with water. Cocoa trees in West Africa are very dependent on rainfall. Cocoa plant originated in the Amazon basin, where it always had constant access to water. So cocoa trees developed very shallow roots, which means they rely on water near the surface and cannot take advantage of the deep soil water reserves that provide a more stable supply. Cocoa trees need on average between 16 and 2400 millimeters of rain per year for optimal production. But West African cocoa regions typically receive between 12 and 1500 millimeters of rain, close to the bare minimum that a tree needs for survival. The result of this is that year-to-year variations can make huge differences to a tree's production. Why? Well, water availability is essential for a plant to produce its energy. If a plant can easily access water, then it will be free to transpire as much as it wants. And transpiration is key for photosynthesis to take place, which in turn is the source of the plant's energy and the core of the production process. If, however, the plant does not have easy access to water, then it will need to limit its transpiration because it must not use up its water reserves. Low transpiration rates mean low photosynthesis, which means the plant will not create the additional energy needed for production. But then there are other ways in which rain impacts the trees. So for example, when a cocoa tree passes from dry to wet conditions, this triggers a wave of leaf flushing and flowering. So leaf flushing happens as soon as a tree sees an increase in soil moisture after a dry period. This leaf flushing will replenish a weakened canopy, and then a healthier, stronger canopy will help boost the tree's rates of photosynthesis and build up energy to produce more flowers, more setting, and more pods. Flowering is then triggered, but only after the canopy has been sufficiently replenished. Next, the clouds themselves help trees by reducing direct radiation from the sun. So cocoa evolved as an understory tree in the moist Amazon basin. This means that it grew among taller tree species, which shaded it from direct sunlight. So cocoa trees developed in medium to low levels of sun, and they still prefer light that has been scattered by clouds or shade trees instead of direct sunlight. Now, rains also affect the activity of pollinators. Cocoa relies a lot on midges to carry out the delicate work of pollination. When it rains, these midges cannot fly, so they can easily miss the narrow window of time when a flower is open to pollen transfer. It is just a matter of hours, and the flower needs to be visited by several insects in order to be properly pollinated. And finally, rains are a key actor in the spread of fungal diseases, which can lead to significant losses to the crop. So when the soil is continuously wet, this increases the amount of black pod spores, which are spread from the soil to the pods via droplet splashing. At the same time, the wet surface of the pods creates an ideal home for the spores to thrive, infect the pod, and then further spread the disease, resulting in hard to predict, but often large losses to the crop. Now, typically, when we think of rain-related issues, we think of water shortage. Not enough water will create hydric stress in the plants, which will cause them to shift their resources and energy towards developing more roots to search for more water. So at this point, the plant's main focus becomes survival rather than pod production. As part of this survival, plants will also shed old leaves, which are not very productive. This reduces the canopy, which will put a further big limitation on production. Furthermore, as soon as water becomes available again, one of the tree's first priorities will be to replenish their canopies. And this is time-consuming, but it is essential before the trees can return their focus to pod and bean production. And both of these effects typically lead to cherel wilt and small bean sizes, the most well-known effects of drought on the cocoa tree. But as it turns out, you can definitely also have too much rain. So for example, waterlogging can cause severe damage to the roots and even lead to the plant's death if it lasts too long. Even just a few days of waterlogging can have dire consequences on the tree's production, as the tree will be prone to abort cherels and even pods. Just to give an idea, the number of sacrificed fruits grows exponentially with the number of days of waterlogging. Excessive rainfall also affects pollination. So not only, as we have just seen, does it impede midges from flying, but heavy rains can also damage the fragile flowers, as well as reduce the mobility of the pollen and thus making it less likely to spread. So too much water increases nutrient leaching from the soil as well. Rains can transport nutrients out of the range of the tree's roots, making them unavailable to the plants that need them. And finally, too much rain will affect other activities such as bean drying and storage. And in this case, dampness can lead to the development and spread of molds and to major crop losses. As you can see, there is much more to the role of precipitations on cocoa than rain is good. By understanding the different effects of precipitation amounts, distribution, and timing on the cocoa tree, we can have a better grasp of the overall effect it will have on cocoa production.